Now, we travel to a place where silence isn't peaceful, it's suffocating. The year is somewhere in the mid-Edo period, and you're waking up in the barest definition of a house wood frame, paper walls, straw mat floor. You're a low-ranking samurai, a hatamoto in name, but not in wealth. The walls are so thin you hear the neighbor's baby sneeze, and you're pretty sure she'll hear your stomach growl in reply. Congratulations, you're noble, educated, and broke. Your bed is a tatami mat, not the luxurious kind. This one is lumpy, musty, and probably older than your uncle. You didn't really sleep, you hovered somewhere between meditation and back pain. You sit up, every joint sounds like it's narrating its own memoir. You glance at your sword, the family heirloom that hasn't seen a battlefield in 3 generations. It gleams faintly in the early light, a reminder that once upon a time, samurai actually had something to do. Peacetime is great for most people. Farmers aren't being raided. Merchants get to sell silk instead of shovels for graveyards. But for you, it's a career crisis. Your job was to fight. There is no fighting. Now, your days are filled with nothing. Or worse, paperwork. The shogunate insists on endless rules, endless hierarchy, and endless ceremonial events, where your main role is to bow at the correct angle while pretending you don't have indigestion. You sigh. The shoji screens slide open with a whisper, letting in a sliver of light and your wife's friendly reminder that it's your turn to clean the hearth. Yes, samurai also clean now. You're trying not to break historical immersion, but when your morning task involves scrubbing ash with a bamboo brush, it's hard not to question your life choices. Still, you try to summon some dignity. After all, you are a warrior. Technically, even if your only battlefield is the rice market, and your fiercest opponent is a rooster that won't stop staring at you while you brush your teeth, you'd love to go back to bed. But the truth is, you can't afford another mattress injury. At this point, you're starting to suspect your straw mat has a personal vendetta. You fold up your bedding with ceremony, it's not much. But it's the only ritual left that still makes you feel like a samurai. That, and sharpening your sword for no reason while pretending not to cry. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and what time it is where you are. I'm always amazed at where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tie your worn obi belt around your robe, stare into the reflection of your own exhausted face in the polished blade, and ask the eternal question of every low-ranking samurai: how is this better than death in battle? You shuffle out of your room, knees popping with every step, and immediately regret being alive. The wooden floor is cold enough to make your teeth shiver in solidarity. There's no insulation in your home, just paper, bamboo, and spiritual optimism. You step over your toddler, who's sleeping diagonally across the hallway like a forgotten futon, and try not to wake the baby. Not because you're considerate, but because once the baby starts, everyone suffers. Your house is a miracle of Edo engineering, a masterclass in minimalist living, which is a polite way of saying it's a box. One room divided by a curtain, a small hearth in the middle, and the ever-present scent of fish that somehow lives in the air like a ghost. You live here with your wife, your 3 children, your brother-in-law, and his extremely judgmental cat. And no, you don't get your own room, you get a corner. If you're lucky. There's no such thing as sleeping in. As a low-rank samurai, you don't even own the concept of rest. You wake up because someone else is sweeping, or boiling water, or coughing dramatically to make sure you know it's time to get up and be useful. You try stretching, but the ceiling beam greets your forehead with a friendly bonk. It's less home and more strategically arranged splinters held together by hope. Breakfast is missing. Again. You forgot to buy rice yesterday. Or maybe you didn't forget. Maybe you were just broke and didn't want to confront the store lady who makes eye contact like she's reading your soul and judging your credit score. Instead, you sip hot water with a single pickle slice floating in it. That's not a joke. That's actual breakfast. Pickled daikon, the traditional meal of people who've accepted defeat but want their stomachs to suffer too. Everyone is already moving. Your wife hands you your haori jacket while also bouncing the baby with her foot and scolding your eldest for licking the wall. It's chaos, but controlled chaos. And weirdly, you're proud. This is your army. An army of sticky hands, loud mouths, and unexpected hugs. You're the general, a very tired general, who is late. You open the door and the morning light punches your eyeballs. The street is alive with noise clogs clacking, dogs barking, merchants shouting things that sound more like threats than advertisements. You walk quickly well, hurry shuffle, because actual running is undignified unless someone's on fire. Everyone you pass is someone who outranks you. That's the other thing about peace hierarchy becomes a full-time job. You bow constantly, not because you want to, but because if you don't, someone will report you to the magistrate for face dishonor. And that leads to paperwork, which is worse than death. Historians still argue whether the strict samurai codes during the Edo period were more about honor or control. But you know the answer. It's control. No one needs you to die in battle anymore. They just need you to keep the peace and shut up about it. Honor is now measured by how quietly you endure injustice. And you, sir, are an honor champion. You arrive at your assigned outpost, a small office, where your main duties include staring at documents, nodding seriously, and occasionally escorting a cart of something you're not allowed to ask questions about. Last week, it was pickled plums. The week before, a tax ledger with 3 missing pages and a suspicious smell. Riveting stuff. But hey, you're a samurai, a proud, noble warrior. Even if your sword is mostly ceremonial and your job title might as well be government assistant. Second class, toilet time. Or as it's unofficially known in Edo-period Japan, the hour of regret. Let's not sugarcoat this. You don't have a bathroom, you have a wooden box, or a hole, or, in really luxurious cases, a hole with a bucket in it. If you're lucky enough to live near a river, you still don't have plumbing. But you do get the pleasure of downstream consequences. Sanitation, in this glorious age of peace, is what one might call optional. The smell hits you before the reality does. Your neighbor's outhouse, yes. You share has been baking in the summer sun like a fermented memory. You hold your breath, walk in, and immediately begin to reevaluate every decision that's brought you here. The wooden seat is damp. With what no one asks, no one dares, you perch like a traumatized pigeon, stare at the grain of the wall, and try to dissociate. There's no toilet paper, obviously. You get 2 choices, a bamboo stick with a soft cloth on the end, or the scrape it and pray option, a small paddle used to push waste further down the communal hole. The tool even has a name, chugi. It sounds elegant until you realize it's basically a poop spatula. And don't even think about asking for privacy. You share your facilities with anyone in your building, which includes your neighbor's 5 children, 1 grandmother, a rooster, and that cat again, at least once a week. Someone swings the outhouse door open without knocking, locks eyes with you in your most vulnerable moment, and slowly closes the door again, never to speak of it. Now, if you were upper class, you'd have a slightly better arrangement. Perhaps a more refined bucket, maybe even some ash to sprinkle over the remains and reduce the odor. But here's the catch, even the elites have to dispose of waste the same way as everyone else, which is to say, dumping it outside, into canals, or trenches, or, if you're feeling particularly festive, into the street at night, accompanied by a yell of warning. Sort of the Edo version of heads-up. Historians still argue whether the Japanese waste management of the Edo period was a proto-recycling marvel or just controlled filth with a PR campaign. The truth, it's both. Human waste was indeed collected and sold as fertilizer, yes. Really. The wealthy actually paid for peasant poop to spread on their rice fields. There's nothing quite like the dignity of knowing your worst moments might help grow someone else's dinner. Of course, this means that some people steal waste. Yes, in this economy. There are literal poop bandits who sneak around at night scooping up fertilizer gold. You, tragically, are not one of them. You pay for your collection service once a month, hoping they don't forget your address again. You finish your business, step outside, and try not to inhale. A breeze carries a smell that's 1 part soy sauce, 2 parts sewage, and 5 parts unresolved karma. You rinse your hands with a scoop of river water and try not to dwell on the fact that the same river was used as a trash bin just hours ago. Hygiene is a privilege, not a right. And yet, everyone around you somehow survives. Not because the environment is clean, but because the microbes gave up. You have the immune system of a demigod. Or, possibly, a man who's just accepted his fate. You shuffle away from the outhouse, grateful that at least the next chore hauling rice sacks is unlikely to involve eye contact with your neighbor mid-squat. Small blessings. Eating, they say, is a comfort. But here in your quiet Edo backstreet, eating is more of a chore or an elaborate joke without a punchline. You're a low-rank samurai. Remember, not a merchant, not a daimyo, not even a decent cook. Which means breakfast is less meal and more edible suggestion. You wake with your stomach already negotiating terms. Rice. That's the offer. White, cold, slightly sticky, and sometimes so dry it could be used as roof shingles. If you're lucky, it's accompanied by miso soup, thin, salty, and occasionally boasting the surprise appearance of a seaweed ribbon or lonely tofu cube. Protein, don't be ridiculous. Fish is for festivals. Eggs are a myth. You've heard rumors of chickens, but none of them live anywhere near your alley. There's also tsukemono pickled vegetables. In theory. In practice, there's something you found buried in brine behind your house and thought, why not crunchy, vinegary, and vaguely suspicious? They add both texture and existential doubt to your meal, but they're fermented, which means healthy. Probably. Unless they were pickled during the Tokugawa shogunate's last recession, in which case they're just decorative. Lunch doesn't improve your odds. A half ball of rice, maybe some leftover soup reheated to the consistency of damp steam. And if your neighbors are feeling generous, you might swap pickles for salted radish. There is an unspoken community tradition of sharing. One person trades salt, another trades vegetables, and a third trades. Hopeful glances. You once traded a single umeboshi pickled plum for 3 bites of barley. It was considered a good deal. Dinner is the same, but with lower expectations. Sometimes it's just riced tea. That's not a euphemism. It's literally hot water poured over old rice with a dash of soy sauce. Called okazuke, it warms your soul and disappoints your stomach simultaneously. Like a hot bath where someone forgot the bath part. You chew slowly, mostly out of necessity. Your teeth aren't great, and the rice has this charming ability to harden around your molars like construction grout. Bread no, meat rare. Spices dream on. Even soy sauce is used sparingly, it's expensive. And you've stretched your last bottle for weeks. You suspect it's more water than sauce now, but it still counts if you shake it with conviction. Historians still argue whether Edo-period diets were nutritious marvels or just malnutrition dressed in ritual. Some point to the low-fat, high-fiber elements of traditional Japanese meals. Others point to the fact that people routinely fainted in fields. You believe in balance, sure. Your diet keeps you lean. But so would starvation. And yet somehow it's ritualized. Before each meal, you clap your hands and say itadakimasu, a word meaning I humbly receive. You don't say, I humbly tolerate. But it's implied, after the meal, it's gochisu-sama, thank you for the meal. You don't specify whether it was good. Just, thank you for not poisoning me. If you were higher rank, you'd have access to miso with more depth, steamed eel on occasion, or those glorious lacquered bento boxes with real compartments and fish that doesn't taste like pond regret. But you're not. You live in a bamboo-walled cube, you earn less than a teenage geisha in training, and your chopsticks are slowly splintering. And yet you bow to your bowl, because that's what's done. Sometimes, in moments of wild optimism, you imagine feasting at a daimyo banquet. Platters of sashimi, plates of soba, grilled river fish so fresh it still has opinions. And then you return to your real-life bento rice, pickles, and a quiet internal scream. Still, there's one consolation: you haven't died of food poisoning yet. Your gut has built antibodies to things modern science hasn't even classified. You're a nutritional survivor, or perhaps a miracle. But most of all, you're just hungry. You get dressed slowly. Not out of luxury, there's no such thing here, but out of strategic hesitation. Because once your robe is on, it's not coming off again for a while. Days. Maybe. possibly weeks. Who knows? Certainly not your neighbors. Everyone smells vaguely smoky and vaguely sweaty. And you all politely pretend you don't. You wear a kimono. Sounds elegant. Right, a sweeping garment, delicately woven and steeped in subtle pattern. Well, yours is beige. Or maybe it was beige once. Now it's the color of boiled straw. It sags around your shoulders and bunches around your knees because it was either passed down from your older brother or bought for 1 coin at a street stall run by a man with 3 teeth and no discernible conscience. The fabric is cotton if you're lucky. Hemp if you're less so. The threads itch like they're being personally vindictive, and they cling to your skin in damp weather like a desperate ex. There's no undershirt, no breathable fibers, no notion of moisture wicking. And when it rains, the whole thing gets heavy enough to qualify as a form of resistance training. You have one robe. One. Washing it is both a logistical and emotional challenge. Soap is made from ashes and rice husks, and it smells faintly like regret. Water is hauled from a public well and heated over firewood that you have to either beg, borrow, or collect yourself. So laundry happens when someone says, "You smell like rice vinegar," and you finally break. As for underwear, let's not. You wear a fundoshi, a loincloth twisted into place with all the confidence of someone playing origami roulette. It's breathable, sure, but only in the way that not wearing pants at all would also be breathable. Footwear are, yes, the graceful wooden getter, raised sandals with 2 tiny blocks underneath, which theoretically keep your feet dry in muddy alleys. What they actually do is trip you on stairs and make every walk sound like a miniature horse is following you. If the thong snaps, and it will you either go barefoot or get creative with twine and sadness. Winter brings an extra layer, a jacket called a haori, which is about as insulating as a wet paper bag. And if you're really fortunate, you might tie straw around your legs for warmth. That's right, straw. Like livestock bedding, except less dignified. Historians still argue whether low-ranking samurai took pride in minimalist appearance or simply had no choice. Some say the aesthetic was about restraint and dignity. Others point out that when everyone's broke, dignity is just clever branding for poverty. Your hair is tidy, though you maintain the chômage, the iconic top-knot shaved crown, oiled front, tied back. It's more effort than the rest of your outfit combined, and it's inspected, because even if your kimono is frayed and your socks have holes, a messy top-knot is social heresy. You'd be ridiculed, or worse, mistaken for a ronin. Sometimes you dream of silk, smooth, colorful, embroidered, reserved for higher caste samurai or merchants who pretend they don't care about status while obviously caring deeply. You dream of slipping your arms into sleeves that aren't scratchy, that don't reek of fish smoke and damp futon. But then again, you'd probably spill pickles on them. So for now, you tighten your sash, slap your wooden sandals onto your sore feet, and pretend not to notice the louse crawling across your collar. It's just one of your roommates. You smile, and instantly regret it. Your gums throb with the dull, ever-present ache of an oncoming disaster. There's something brewing in your back molar, a slow-burning storm of rot and rage. You poke at it with your tongue. Mistake. It flares like a firework. You try to look dignified, but your eyes are watering. And that's not just from the morning wind. Dental hygiene as a low-ranking samurai in Edo-period Japan is, well, it exists, sort of, but don't expect toothbrushes with soft bristles or minty freshness. No, you rely on what's called a toothpick stick, a frayed twig, chewed at one end to make it vaguely brush-like. You scrape your teeth with it each morning while pretending you're not damaging the enamel. Historians still argue whether this counted as cleaning or just spreading the bacteria around like butter on bad toast. And speaking of bacteria, you don't know about them. No one does. Germ theory won't exist for another 2 centuries. You just know that your teeth turn black, sometimes fall out. And every so often, someone's jaw swells up until they stop showing up at tea gatherings. Mouthwash. Rinsing with warm salt water is the closest thing, though some Buddhist monks recommend sake, which may be less about sanitation and more about numbing the existential dread of your molars attempting mutiny. You've lost 3 teeth. You think, it's hard to be sure anymore. One molar cracked during a meal involving something that may or may not have been dried eel. It broke clean down the middle. Like the universe just gave up on dental alignment. The pain stayed for weeks. You didn't sleep much. Someone suggested you press a hot iron nail to your cheek to kill the infection. You smiled and said maybe later. You meant never. Dentistry exists, technically, but it's done by itinerant tooth pullers, a cheerful name for traveling men with metal hooks and the bedside manner of a blacksmith. There's no anesthesia, no sterilization. Just two guys holding you down and a third one yanking until the tooth comes out, or your will to live does. You've seen it once. A merchant's assistant, red-faced, screaming into a piece of cloth while the dentist worked like he was gutting a fish. The result? A gap-toothed grin and an infection that spread to his eye. They say he lived. You believe them. You just don't want to. But hey, bad breath isn't as shameful as it is now. Everyone smells like pickled radish and fermented bean paste. So nobody's keeping track. If your breath clears a room, it might even be a sign of strength. Or at least a deterrent. There's powdered charcoal. You can rub it on your teeth if you're feeling fancy. Or if a tea ceremony demands your best smile. Some wealthier samurai dye their teeth black ohaguro to show elegance and devotion. You just try not to bleed when chewing. A fringe tidbit, there's a Buddhist temple rumored to house a statue of Yakushi Nyorai, the medicine Buddha. That supposedly cures toothaches if you rub its jaw. You once made the pilgrimage, rubbed so hard you gave yourself a blister. The pain got worse. You gave up and chewed on green tea leaves instead. So now, every bite is a negotiation. Rice too hot, pain. Pickles too sour, pain. Miss a grain and bite your cheek. That's a week of agony with bonus swelling. You adapt, you chew slower, you sigh more, you start to understand why older samurai sip their meals like soup and avoid talking at banquets. Because surviving as a low-rank samurai isn't about fighting, it's about eating without crying. Your body aches before you even open your eyes, not from yesterday's heroic battle, but from chopping kindling for your lord's bathwater. Welcome to the warrior class where you have a sword, but no servants. You roll off your straw mat like a man 3 decades older than you are. Because in this era, you're basically middle-aged by 30. Today's to-do list, a riveting combination of mending the thatch roof, polishing armor that hasn't seen combat since your grandfather wore it, and overseeing rice collection from your village's less than enthusiastic farmers. There's also firewood to split, the well to clean, and if you're lucky, maybe even a half-day trip to Edo Castle where you'll do absolutely nothing but bow in the hallway and not make eye contact with anyone important. Being a low-rank samurai during peace means working. A lot. Yes, you're technically above the merchant class, and yes, you wear 2 swords, but you're also wearing patched clothes and eating barley instead of rice. Historians still argue whether this period of peace brought honor or humiliation to samurai, who were trained to fight, but instead ended up as bureaucrats, landlords, or, in your case, glorified maintenance men. Your labor is relentless, and not in the productive, career-advancing way. It's more of a never-ending cycle of minor crises. Your roof leaks. Fix it. Your sandal strap breaks, fix that too. Or limp awkwardly while pretending you're meditating on impermanence. There's a reason so many samurai wrote poetry. Not because they had time to reflect on cherry blossoms, but because it was the only outlet for their repressed rage and spiritual vertigo. At least you're not farming. Right, wrong. Your stipend measured in rice isn't enough to survive, so you volunteer to work your lord's fields in exchange for essentials. You bend your back like a peasant, only with less skill. Your hands blister. You get sunstroke. You envy the farmers, they do this better, and with fewer philosophical crises. Your wife, if you have one, works just as hard. She manages the household, raises the children, spins cloth, and makes the impossible budget stretch further than your armor straps. If she's lucky, she doesn't die in childbirth. If you're lucky, your son survives infancy and doesn't grow up cursing you for a legacy of rice taxes and resentment. Even children aren't spared. By the age of 5, your son is already learning to write kanji, carry water, and bow deeply to anyone who outranks him, which is basically everyone. Childhood is short, very short. One day you're bouncing on a parent's knee. The next, you're expected to serve tea without spilling and know the finer points of Confucian virtue. And for you, there are no weekends, no concept of off hours. The temple bell rings, and your day begins. It ends when the sun sets or your arms give out, whichever comes first. You dream of swords, but wake to cleaning drains. You train to die in battle. Instead, you live on a strict budget and hope the ink on your tax ledgers doesn't smear in the summer humidity. You often wonder what your ancestors would think those glorious samurai who charged across plains on horseback, banners flying in the wind. Probably they'd laugh or sigh, or hand you a rake and tell you to get back to work. And so you toil not for glory, not even for survival, but for obligation, the way of the warrior. In peacetime is mostly carpentry, calligraphy, and carrying heavy things uphill. Your eyes open before the first rooster call, not because you're excited for the day, but because you're cold, very cold. The kind of cold that wraps around your bones and makes you question if your soul has shrunk 2 sizes overnight. Your bedding, a single threadbare blanket over a straw mat, has the insulation of a wet napkin. Outside, the wind howls through the gaps in your paper walls like a judgmental ancestor. Winter in Edo, Japan is beautiful in art and poetry. In real life, it's a lesson in endurance. You huddle closer to your tiny charcoal brazier, which does a spectacular job of warming your ankles and absolutely nothing else. There's no central heating, no hot shower, no wool socks from Uniqlo. You tie a second sash around your thin cotton robe and breathe fog indoors. Historians still argue whether samurai truly suffered more in the cold due to pride refusing to wear anything common like peasant trousers, or if that's just what happens when your pride is inversely proportional to your bank account. You consider going outside to relieve yourself. Then reconsider, because winter means the outhouse is basically an icebox filled with nightmarish wooden seats, icy air slapping your backside with zero apology. You opt to hold it and instead sip lukewarm barley tea, pretending it's enough to thaw your spirit. In summer, things don't improve, they just become a different kind of unbearable. The heat smothers you like a wet futon laid directly on your face. You sweat through your clothes before breakfast and continue leaking fluids all day. There's no such thing as antiperspirant. No fans. Just a folded bamboo fan you wave manually, which helps approximately 0% of your overheated misery. Your home turns into a low-budget sauna. The air inside is stagnant, the walls sweat with condensation, and mosquitoes arrive like VIP guests invited to a blood buffet. You've never slapped your own body so much. At least winter had the decency to freeze them. And clothing. Oh yes, your one set of seasonally agnostic robes is totally not built for either extreme. In winter, the thin weave offers all the protection of a ghost costume. In summer, it clings to your body like wet seaweed. Samurai attire looks elegant in ink paintings. But in practice, it's an elaborate trap of discomfort. You do your chores anyway, sword tucked into your sash like it's going to protect you from heat stroke or hypothermia. But mostly, it's just ceremonial at this point. You'd gladly trade it for a thick jacket or a functioning umbrella. The weather rules your mood. When it's cold, you're sluggish, brittle, and grim. When it's hot, you're irritated, itchy, and grim. Your body never fully recovers from the seasons, it just adapts. Slightly more bitter each year. And yet, you don't complain. You were taught to suffer with dignity. You recite a haiku in your head about withering leaves and empty skies, trying to frame your seasonal despair as natural harmony. It almost works, until another gust of wind sneaks down your robe and reminds you that nature is objectively out to get you. You pass other samurai in the street. Their faces are just as red from the cold or just as shiny with sweat. No one says a word. You all know, you all endure. There's quiet camaraderie and collective seasonal suffering. It's like a shared inside joke, except no one's laughing. And everyone's freezing or frying, even in your dreams. The weather invades. Snowstorms in your memories, summer heat in your nightmares. There's no real escape. You just wait for spring to arrive, for autumn to offer brief relief before the next battle with the elements begins anew. You crouch beside the well, staring into its murky depths like it's about to tell your fortune. The good news, you've survived the weather. The bad news, now you have to drink this. Water in Edo-period Japan is complicated. On paper, it's clean and well managed. In reality, it's suspicious at best, terrifying at worst. You're supposed to boil it, but firewood costs money, and charcoal runs out. So you do what most low-rank samurai do, pretend you didn't notice that floating leaf, or that tiny black speck doing laps in your cup. You tilt the ladle, sip the lukewarm liquid, and try not to think about what else might be in it. Historians still argue whether Edo's water systems were a marvel of early urban planning or just slightly less deadly than cholera. Either way, you're drinking fate with a side of stomach cramps. Bathing is a ritual, but also a minor existential crisis. Technically, you're supposed to purify your body at the local sento, the public bathhouse. Sounds pleasant, right until you realize it's communal. Fully communal, as in, you strip down in front of elderly men who judge your posture, your scars, and possibly your soul. You sit on a tiny wooden stool, scrub with a rag that smells faintly of mildew, and try to ignore the freezing air stabbing your wet back. Hot water is a blessing if you get there before they run out. You soak in the tub until your skin puckers like pickled radish. It's almost relaxing, until you remember the bathwater is reused. Yep, reused. By everyone. Still, it's better than skipping the bath altogether, which leads to a problem samurai scrolls rarely mention body odor that could scare off stray dogs. In summer, you sweat through your robes. In winter, you don't. But your feet still manage to smell like expired vinegar. Soap exists, kind of usually lye-based, and it burns if you have cuts. Which you do. Constantly. And now, the real joy nature's little parasites. Bath or no bath, you are never truly alone. Fleas live in your bedding, lice nest in your robe seams. Mosquitoes perform nightly rituals on your ankles. One quirky scroll even recommends using powdered incense ash to deter bugs. It doesn't work, but at least you smell less like a compost heap and more like a spiritual offering. But the water problems don't stop at bathing or drinking. Cooking with bad water. Welcome to flavorless diarrhea with every rice porridge. Wound cleaning. Prepare to die slightly cleaner. Washing clothes. You laugh dryly because your mouth is parched. Laundry isn't a thing unless it rains. And even then, the runoff isn't exactly pristine, even when you think you've got clean water like from an urban pipe system or neighborhood spring. There's always the risk of backflow contamination. You'd love to blame the peasants, but you're just as guilty of dumping things you shouldn't into nearby streams, including your guilt. Despite everything, you try to maintain ritual. You sprinkle water before the household shrine. You wash your hands sort of before meals. You offer tea to guests, praying it boils away the invisible ecosystem swimming in your kitchen. Water is sacred. Water is dangerous. Water is both your ally and your executioner. And at night, as you settle down on your musty futon, you hear the trickle of a nearby stream and think at least it sounds peaceful. Just don't drink from it, or step in it barefoot, or let it get into your open wounds, or trust it, ever. Now, we find ourselves waking up on the frostbitten edge of the Han Dynasty, about as far from the Forbidden Palace as you can physically, spiritually, and hygienically be. You would never think that surviving in a well-organized empire like Han China could feel like being exiled to a wooden box full of snoring men and unspeakable odors. But here you are. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice isn't the cold, it's the distinct smell of feet. Yours, possibly. But there are other contenders. You're in a cramped barracks, jammed wall to wall with young men and older regrets, all wrapped in mats made from woven straw that, if tested in a lab, would likely come back as 40% mildew and 60% unidentifiable sadness. You try to stretch, but your spine resists, as though it's questioning your life choices. The floor beneath you groans are dramatic. Moody floor, obviously offended that you dare shift your weight without permission. Above you, beams sag under the accumulated weight of snow and indifference. You were promised a life of martial honor and civil respect. Instead, you get a splinter the size of a hairpin lodged under your fingernail before you've even stood up. The walls of the barracks do nothing to stop the cold. They let it in like an honored guest. The wind weaves through every crack and knot in the wood like a curious spirit. And you start your day already wishing it was tomorrow. There's no rooster to greet the dawn, but your bunkmate's snoring serves as a pretty convincing war horn. It rattles through the room like a broken drum. You briefly debate stuffing millet into his nose. The garrison sits somewhere along the Empire's northwestern frontier. Which frontier doesn't matter. If there's sand, rocks, and the looming anxiety of steppe invasions, congrats. You've made it. Outside the barracks lies a courtyard so dry, your breath feels like it's getting splinters. You step out barefoot for a second, just long enough to regret everything. This particular garrison was built as part of the Empire's defensive lattice against the ever-unpredictable Xiongnu. Historians still argue whether these frontier posts were more symbolic than functional, like a stern eyebrow raised at nomadic raiders. But symbolic or not, you're here, and your toes are slowly turning into chalk. As you line up with the other soldiers, you exchange the standard good morning look, part recognition, part shared misery. And part did you sleep? Or were you just lying down, regretting your enlistment choices? No one talks yet. Talking is a luxury for after breakfast and before screaming. There's a commander stomping down the line, his breath fogging the air like a smoke signal of disdain. He checks faces, mats, teeth. Yes, teeth. You're not sure why either, but it's probably just one more way to assert dominance. You smile. He frowns. You're off to a great start. And just as your stomach starts grumbling in protest, a horn sounds, signaling breakfast. You'd be excited if that horn didn't also signal things like enemy movement, fire drills, and occasionally, oops, we forgot to cook. But at least you're alive. Cold, tired, splintered, but alive. For now, you don't awaken so much as you unfold slowly, painfully from a human knot tied in the cold. You've spent the night on a coarse mat stuffed with millet husk, and the garrison walls do nothing to block the wind that hisses through the cracks like a nosy neighbor. Your breath fogs in front of you. It's not yet dawn, but your shift is already late. The penalty for tardiness is public flogging, or worse, scrubbing the latrines without gloves. Again, your sleeping quarters are generous by frontier standards, a shared barracks with 13 other men, and a rat who's claimed squatters' rights in the rice jar. There's a fire pit in the middle of the room, but no one had the energy to keep it burning through the night. Everyone wakes up cold, creaky, and vaguely furious at the existence of mornings. You change well. No, you rearrange your one uniform. You haven't washed it in weeks. Mostly because the nearest clean water is 2 kilometers away and reserved for people with actual rank. Your tunic itches like it was woven from regrets and camel hair. You cinch your belt. Tucking in the ceremonial knife you're technically supposed to polish every day but haven't touched in months. It's mostly decorative. You, unfortunately, are not. Breakfast is a bowl of millet gruel, the culinary equivalent of giving up. It's lukewarm, mildly sour, and has the texture of wet parchment. There's a single pickled radish on the side your weekly ration. You stare at it with the reverence of someone who might name it and write poetry in its honor. Historians still argue whether low-rank soldiers in the Han frontier had access to such luxuries, or whether this was a bribe from a superior officer who felt mildly bad for yesterday's punishment parade. After this feast of beige, you check your gear bow with 3 arrows, 1 chipped, sword with a cracked hilt, and a wicker helmet that wouldn't stop a sneeze. The armory keeps promising better equipment, but somehow the shipment always gets delayed by bandits. It's a running joke bandits are blamed for everything. Bad weather bandits, lost boots, bandits, the commanding officer's missing wine jug, legendary bandits, clearly. You step outside into the yard and the day slaps you awake with freezing wind. The garrison bell rings, summoning everyone for the morning inspection. Captain Liu circles the line with his hands clasped behind his back like a man about to critique pottery. He's 30, looks 50, and has the resting face of a disappointed librarian. His eyes flick to your sword, your boots, your posture. You straighten instinctively, trying not to look as tired as you feel. You pass. Barely. Someone else isn't so lucky his belt is twisted, and he earns a backhand slap and an extra turn at wall duty. You don't flinch. You're used to it. This is the Han frontier, no war, no peace. Just a parade of little humiliations dressed up in iron discipline. Now comes the scroll reading edicts from the Emperor himself, read aloud by an officer who may or may not be literate. You try to focus, but the wind whistles louder than his voice, and your stomach is busy negotiating a ceasefire with your intestines. Something about crop quotas, something about respecting harmony. Mostly, it's code for don't cause trouble. And then, finally, the words you've been waiting for assigned duties. Today, you get watchtower duty. 6 hours of standing still while your feet turn to bricks and your bladder files for emancipation. Still, it's better than latrine patrol or rat chasing. You salute, grab your bow, and start the climb. Congratulations. You've made it to sunrise without being demoted, berated, or bitten. Truly, a miracle. Climbing the watchtower is the closest you'll get to cardio today, unless you count the full-body shiver that kicks in whenever the wind slaps you in the kidneys. The stairs creak with ancient resentment, each step groaning like it resents your weight specifically. When you reach the top, you're greeted by a view that can best be described as brown. Brown hills, brown dirt, brown wooden walls like the entire world forgot about color and settled on earthy sadness instead. But you're not here for scenery. You're here to spot potential threats, roving bandits, runaway horses, or disgruntled tax collectors who've decided to go rogue. Spoiler, you rarely spot anything. The frontier is about as lively as a library after curfew. You settle into your post, clutching your bow like it might warm your fingers through sheer proximity. Watch duty is a masterclass in boredom. You alternate between staring at nothing and pretending to stare at something, so your commanding officer won't accuse you of mental drifting. One time, a guy nodded off and claimed he was meditating on the Tao. It didn't work. He's still cleaning latrines 3 weeks later. To stay awake, you play games with yourself. Count the clouds, rank the birds, invent backstories for the guards on the opposite tower. That one with the crooked helmet secret poet. The one who never blinks, probably dead inside. You, meanwhile, develop a passionate grudge against a squirrel that's been taunting you from the same tree for days. It knows. Eventually, another guard trudges up the stairs, carrying a clay mug that allegedly contains tea. You swap shifts, take the mug, and sip. It's mostly warm water with 2 tea leaves floating like survivors of a shipwreck. Still, it's liquid, and therefore a luxury. You nod in thanks and descend. Next assignment, wall inspection. This involves walking the perimeter and poking wooden slats with a stick to see if anything wobbles. It's the sort of job that makes you question your life choices. Once, a board gave way and a soldier fell into a drainage ditch. He was fine physically, spiritually. He never recovered. You spot a gap near the west gate and report it to your superior. He nods solemnly, writes it on a bamboo slip, and tucks it behind his ear. You're not sure if that means he'll fix it or feed it to a goat later. Historians still argue whether frontier officers were actually competent or just very confident at pretending to be. Lunchtime rolls around, heralded by the clanging of a bell and the collective sigh of the half-starved. You join the queue at the mess hall, a building that smells faintly of cabbage, mold, and regret. The cook, a man named Bao who claims he once cooked for the imperial palace he didn't, ladles out steaming bowls of something. It's grey. It's thick. It jiggles when disturbed. Stew, he announces. Without elaboration, you don't ask questions. You sit on a crate, hunch over your bowl, and eat with the resigned efficiency of someone who's tasted worse. You find a chicken bone. Jackpot. You finish. Wipe your mouth on your sleeve, which is also your napkin, your scarf, and sometimes your pillow, and return the bowl. The cook glares at you like you've insulted his ancestors. You bow. It's unclear whether that's respect or self-defense. The rest of the afternoon is patrol duty, walking laps around the garrison wall with a partner who talks non-stop about fishing, even though you're 500 miles from a proper river. You nod politely, say "ah" at intervals, and quietly hope he forgets your name so he stops including you in hypothetical fishing trips. As the sun sets, your shift ends. You return to the barracks, where your rat roommate has brought friends. You lie on your mat, stare at the ceiling, and wonder how many more years of this you have left. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so is your shift tomorrow. The garrison doesn't sleep. It just powers down into low-effort misery. Unfortunately, your turn on night guard comes sooner than you'd like. You're roused from your mat by a boot gently nudging your ribs, a considerate upgrade from the usual yelling. Outside, the air is brisk and smells faintly of pine smoke and latrine wind. You shiver into your cloak and strap on your gear. You trudge to your post near the outer fence, a jagged wall of sharpened logs lashed together with optimism and rope. Your weapon of choice, a halberd that weighs roughly as much as your regrets. The edge is so dull, it could legally qualify as a stick. Still, you sling it over your shoulder and try to look alert. Night watch isn't glamorous. It's 6 hours of squinting into the dark and pretending to know the difference between rustling grass and imminent attack. Most nights are uneventful, others less so. Last week, 2 wolves tried to make off with a sack of dried turnips. It was the most action the garrison had seen in months. Historians still argue whether those wolves were unusually bold or just bored senseless like the rest of you. Tonight, there's fog, the thick kind, where even your outstretched hand looks like it's fading into another dimension. You grip your halberd tighter, comforted by the fact that at least your enemies won't see you either until they're close enough to bite. You're paired with Liu, who has mastered the ancient military art of falling asleep standing up. Every few minutes, he startles awake and mumbles something about ghosts or dumplings, then nods off again. You envy his skill deeply. To stay sane, you compose haiku in your head. Cold fog surrounds me. My feet have become ice blocks. Rats sleep more than me. Your stomach rumbles. Midnight snack. That's funny. The last time someone tried sneaking extra food at night, they were caught chewing a stale rice cake under their blanket. Punishment cleaning latrines with a rag tied to a stick. Somehow, the rag made it worse. You begin to hallucinate vague shapes in the mist shadows that twitch, noises that might be foxes or figments. Then a shout. Real this time. You and Liu snap to attention, Liu more slowly, and rush toward the sound. It's a sentry at the southern gate. He points into the darkness, yelling about a figure near the tree line. You all squint like confused pigeons. Nothing. You fan out cautiously, halberds at the ready, feet crunching frost-crusted grass, and then you see it, a person-shaped blur disappearing behind a rock. You chase. Your lungs burn, your feet slip, your halberd nearly flattens a bush. But by the time you round the rock, nothing. Just fog and your own wheezing breath. The others arrive behind you, equally empty-handed. Bandit scout, someone mutters, drunk shepherd. Another counters. Historians still argue whether garrison outposts actually faced constant threats, or whether most intrusions were just figments of overworked, underfed soldiers desperately needing excitement. Either way, the commander is notified. You return to your post, pulse still thudding in your ears. The adrenaline wears off quickly, replaced by exhaustion and the creeping suspicion that you may have imagined the whole thing. Fog has a way of turning imagination into reality. And back again. The sun rises slowly, revealing nothing out of place. No bandits, no tracks, just the same muddy footprints and frost-slicked walls. You hand off your halberd to the next guard and shuffle back to the barracks. Sleep claims you before your head even hits the mat. It smells faintly of damp wool and someone else's dreams. You wake up to a faint ache in your lower back and a louder ache in your pride. Your glorious life as a Han Dynasty frontier soldier continues this time with latrine duty. Congratulations. Apparently, running through fog chasing imaginary invaders wasn't heroic enough to get you out of waste management. The latrines are a short walk from the barracks, if by short, you mean far enough to regret every life choice. They're located downwind mercifully, but also downhill, which becomes a thrilling mudslide during rainy seasons. Today the path is dry, which is great, because it means all the smells are crisp and concentrated. Latrines in your garrison are rudimentary, wooden platforms with open pits beneath. There are no walls, no privacy, just you, the elements, and several comrades bonding over shared discomfort. Toilets are less a place of relief and more a slow social experiment. If you've ever wanted to hold eye contact while someone uses a bucket with a hole in it, this is your moment. And don't ask about toilet paper. You use leaves, or sticks, or bits of leftover parchment from broken supply crates. One soldier once used the edge of his sleeve in desperation. It did not end well. Historians still debate whether fabric hygiene methods were invented before or after the outbreak of several mysterious rashes. Your job this morning is to stir the pit. Yes, that's a real task. Using a long wooden pole, let's call it the staff of displeasure. You agitate the contents so they settle more evenly, and honestly, does it matter? It's a pit of collective shame. Nothing you do improves it. But orders are orders. Next, you scatter ash over the top, not for sanitation, just to slightly dampen the scent. It doesn't work. The smell is like burnt garlic and broken dreams. One soldier vomits every time. You've learned to breathe through your mouth and think about literally anything else. Like whether ghosts can smell. After cleanup, you're allowed to return and wash up at the communal trough. Washing is optional, depending on whether there's water left in the barrel. Today, you're in luck. A few cold, muddy scoops and your hands feel less cursed. You dry them on your shirt, which is also your sleeping shirt, and eating shirt, and only shirt. You grab your daily ration, a small lump of millet rice, boiled into submission. There's a sprinkle of fermented soybean paste, if you're lucky. You're not lucky. The rice is chewy, somehow both sticky and dry. It tastes like wet parchment. You chew anyway. Hunger doesn't care about texture. Nearby, two soldiers argue about whether bandits are scarier than the northern barbarians. You chime in with a third option, the garrison cook. Everyone nods grimly. The cook once served turnip soup that was just hot water with a turnip staring from the bottom, like it regretted everything. As you eat, you feel a light breeze welcome relief from the latrine air and look out at the empty horizon. Somewhere out there, real danger may lurk. But here in the garrison, the danger is mostly boredom, sanitation failure, and whatever's growing in Liu's boots. Still, you made it through latrine duty without vomiting or crying. That's a victory. You may not be the strongest soldier here, but today you're the cleanest. Relatively, drills begin again at midday, which is the universe's way of reminding you that muscles can ache in places you didn't know you had. You line up with the other soldiers in formation, back straight, knees bent slightly, spear vertical, expression somewhere between intense and constipated. The sun scorches overhead. Your straw hat offers about as much protection as a thin apology. Sweat trickles down your neck, into your collar, and directly into your soul. You'd kill for a breeze. Instead, you get barked commands from Sergeant Borevoice, whose tone makes every sentence sound like an insult even stand still. The drill is simple in theory block. Thrust, step back. In practice, your arms feel like wet noodles, and your wooden spear has a splinter that found a very personal place in your palm. Your hands are blistered, your shoulder twitches involuntarily, and you're fairly certain your right foot has staged a silent protest. Training is relentless. You're told that the Xiongnu enemy could attack any time. Except, historically, they haven't for months. Historians still argue whether these drills were designed for readiness or to prevent soldiers from losing their minds to boredom. Because nothing fuels paranoia like too much free time and not enough food. One drill involves crawling on your belly through gravel to simulate evasion. You suspect it's just to simulate pain. Tiny rocks wedge into your elbows and knees. The gravel smells faintly of something burnt. Probably ambition. After crawling comes wall climbing. There's a makeshift barricade that pretends to be a fortress. It's made of stacked logs and indifference. You run, jump, miss the top by an inch, and slide down with all the grace of a sack of wet laundry. Your comrade Ping manages to make it up. You hate him now. Lunch is served late. Millet cake. Again. It's dry, crumbly, and somehow manages to suck all moisture from your mouth before dissolving into what you can only describe as edible dust. There's a debate over whether chewing or just swallowing it whole is better. One soldier sprinkles water on his to make a paste. You don't have that luxury. You eat, you cough, you regret. After lunch, the officer assigns you to wall watch, the highlight of your day. Truly, you climb the ladder to the sentry tower. From up here, the horizon looks exactly the same as yesterday flat plains. Dry wind, distant trees that never seem to move closer. The only excitement is spotting a lizard. You name it Commander Tailwig and salute. It disappears under a rock, honestly. It's probably a better soldier than most of you. You're expected to rotate shifts with another watchman, but he's napping under the shade of the archery platform. You consider waking him. You decide against it. Solidarity. Sometimes, merchants pass the outpost camel caravans carrying silk, spices or letters from cities far away. You stare at them like they're mirages. They don't stop. You wouldn't either. Evening drills involve archery. Your bowstring is frayed, your arrows warped. You aim, loose, and miss the target by a generous distance. Sergeant Borevoice grunts in your direction. You nod solemnly, as if this was a strategic warning shot. No one believes you. The day winds down. You stretch your sore limbs and pat down the dust. You haven't bathed in days. You smell like old leather and anxiety, but you're still standing, somehow. And tomorrow you'll do it all over again, maybe with less gravel in your undergarments. But no promises. You wake the next morning to the sound of gongs again. Not the elegant chime of ritual, but the hammer-to-metal clang that says, "Get up or get flogged." Your legs scream. Your back has redefined the word stiff, and your fingers permanently curled around the shape of yesterday's spear. Today, you're assigned to dig trenches, which sounds like a break from combat training until you realize that digging in sun-baked earth with a wooden spade is just an elaborate way to beg for heat stroke. You hack at the dirt like it insulted your family. It barely notices. Each trench is supposed to help drain rainwater and defend against surprise attacks, which is ironic because it hasn't rained in weeks and the closest enemy is probably also dehydrated and sick of dirt. Historians still argue whether frontier trench systems were military necessities or just exercises in creative punishment. A fellow soldier beside you, Jun, keeps humming. You ask what the song is. He says it's about tofu. You decide not to question it. Anything to distract from the blisters forming on your palms. You try not to think about how many layers of skin you've lost since arriving. Once the trench is deep enough to hide your shame, you're sent to fill water buckets. The well is down a hill, past the latrine zone where air quality becomes a suggestion. The bucket's handle bites into your hand. The water sloshes. You lose half before you return. No one complains. It's a miracle you brought any back. At midday, you're volunteered for patrol duty beyond the outpost walls. This sounds exciting. It is not. You walk slowly through the dry scrublands, eyes peeled for bandits or wild animals. What you actually find are rocks, and one suspiciously shaped bush that turns out to be just a bush. There's no shade. You wrap your head in cloth to avoid burning. You've now worn the same outfit for 3 weeks. It smells like disappointment and mildew. The coarse linen tunic rubs your underarms raw. You try adjusting it. It laughs at you. In the afternoon, the garrison is ordered to clean the armory, which is located in a stone building that, by noon, is roughly the temperature of freshly baked pottery. You scrub rust off halberds. You polish arrowheads. You sort spear shafts by length and straightness. And you begin to hallucinate that one of the swords is whispering insults. Someone drops a helmet. It lands with a clang and cracks at the rim. You all freeze. The officer looks. The soldier mutters an apology and offers to fix it. The officer tells him to wear it instead for the next 3 days as punishment. He nods solemnly. You suspect it's not the worst punishment he's had. Before dinner, there's time for calligraphy practice, yes. Calligraphy. Because even garrison life insists you be both warrior and scholar. You dip a brittle brush into ink and attempt to copy poems about peace and lotus blossoms. Your handwriting resembles terrified ants. You try to hide your paper. Jun sees it, says beautiful. You're unsure if he's sincere or deeply sarcastic. You nod anyway. Dinner is better than usual, which means it's lukewarm cabbage soup with real salt, and dumplings with something inside. You don't ask. You chew. You survive. The sky darkens, the wind picks up, and the command is shouted, "Prepare for night drills." You scream inside. You limp out under moonlight, clutching a practice spear, half awake and 100% resentful. Night drills are not optional. They're designed to simulate enemy ambush scenarios, which really means keep you from sleeping enough to think straight. You shuffle into line, armor half fastened, feet still sore from yesterday's trench-digging extravaganza. Your commanding officer bellows something inspirational like, "If the Xiongnu come at night, you'll die tired." Motivating, uplifting, a war cry for sleep-deprived morale. Tonight's drill involves running through sand in full gear, dodging fake arrows, and crawling under horizontal poles while being shouted at. You briefly consider rolling into the bushes and pretending to be a deer. but you're wearing bronze-plated shin guards. And deer famously don't jingle. Your group charges across the training ground. Someone trips, sending a wave of falling bodies like dominoes. You end up with a sandal in your face and a bruised hip. Historians still argue whether these drills genuinely prepared soldiers or just increased the odds of sprained ankles. The best part after the drills, there's maintenance. Because nothing says restful night like checking your weapon for rust at midnight. You squat by a torchlit bench, rubbing oil into your blade and wondering if this is character building or character erasing. Then clouds roll in. The temperature drops. A Han frontier night isn't cool, it's atmospheric revenge. The wind whips through the wall cracks. Your cloak flaps like a tattered flag. You huddle by a dying fire, holding a clay mug of barley tea that's mostly warm water with mood. Another soldier beside you, Chen, starts talking about his dream. To open a tea shop when he retires. He's 19. He's already got grey hair. You nod along. You're not sure if the tea shop is a fantasy or a symptom of heat stroke. Eventually, someone plays a flute badly. It sounds like a goose caught in a net, but it's strangely soothing. You lean back, watching the smoke curl into the sky, trying to pretend the stars are inspiring and not just reminders of how far from home you are. You sleep where you sit, head drooping, cloak tucked around your shoulders. Your dreams involve bamboo traps, bad poetry, and one very angry goat. At dawn, the gong again. Surprise, a dust storm is approaching. Orders are barked to reinforce the outer walls. You wrap cloth around your mouth and climb the ramparts with a sack of sandbags. The wind screams, dust slices your face. Visibility drops to almost nothing. You can't tell if you're fortifying the wall or just throwing sandbags into the void. A rock hits your ankle. A bird flies overhead, panicked. You wonder if even the birds have second thoughts about being born here. You manage to hold the line against the wind, against gravity, against your own body's demands for rest. Your legs wobble, your eyes burn, your knuckles are cracked, and your sinuses are now 80% gravel. Afterward, the garrison commander praises the unit. No one died. Good job, that's the bar. Just not dying, you return to your quarters, which smell like dried sweat and bamboo mold. Someone's snoring. Someone else is mumbling about ghosts. You collapse onto your cot. The wind still howls outside. Inside, your heart rate slows. You made it through the storm. Just don't ask about tomorrow. At sunrise, the trumpet sounds again melodic. Yes, but about as welcome as a slap to the face. You peel yourself off the cot like old rice off a cooking pot. Your limbs ache in new places. Apparently, the dust storm has passed. The sun is out. Good news, your lungs are now dry. Bad news, so is the only water barrel. You're summoned for ration duty. This means guarding a cart filled with half-rotten turnips and dried grain that tastes like regret. Your job, make sure none of the troops take more than their assigned scoop. Because nothing builds camaraderie like starvation policing. A soldier named Bao tries to sneak an extra turnip. You pretend not to see it. He's lost 2 toenails and hasn't stopped coughing for a week. He needs it more than the rule book does. After the shift, it's time to wash, sort of. There's a shared bucket of tepid water, grey from previous use. You dip your hands in and wipe your face with a rag that's seen too many cheeks. The good news, no one expects you to smell good. The bad news, the flies still visit you anyway. Then comes patrol duty. You walk the perimeter of the fort, muddy ground, sun beating down, helmet sliding over sweat-soaked hair. One of your fellow guards tells a story about a haunted tree in a nearby forest. You nod, half interested, half sunburned. Historians still debate whether Han soldiers genuinely believed in tree spirits or just needed something to blame for the smell of latrines. You spot something on the horizon, just a dust swirl, maybe a deer. But the anxiety clings. This place doesn't let you relax, even when you're bored. You're never calm. Later, you help bury another soldier's boots. Not the soldier he just deserted. Left a note. "Tell my goat, I'm sorry." You all agree he's probably happier now, even if he's wolf food. Back at camp, someone's baking a rice cake. It smells like actual food. You get a slice the size of your thumb. It's the highlight of your week. You think about writing home. But parchment is scarce, so you talk to the wind instead, whispering updates into the breeze like a homesick child, pretending it carries words eastward. As night falls, a commander gives a pep talk. You are the shield of the Empire. You smile, dryly, mostly. You're a sponge absorbing heat, dust, and disappointment. You sleep in a half-upright position because your back still hurts from the last spear practice. The stars glitter overhead, utterly unbothered by your existence. The garrison is silent now, save for the rustling reeds, the low groan of timber walls, and someone mumbling in dreams, probably about goats again. Tomorrow, you'll clean weapons, reinforce walls, spar in the heat, and maybe, just maybe, dream of retirement, or at least indoor plumbing. But for now, you let your muscles slacken. The pain dulls, your breathing slows, your mind floats like driftwood down a lazy stream. You survived another day on the frontier. You earned this sleep. Word count 595. Wind down, and now everything softens. The sounds of swords and storms fade gently into memory. The dust on your skin settles. The ache in your shoulders, the clamor of duty, the weight of the Empire all drift away with each breath. You're no longer a sentinel staring across miles of wilderness. You're just a heartbeat in the dark, safe for a moment beneath distant stars. Let your mind grow quiet. Let your limbs grow still. There are no drills now, no orders to follow, no spears to clean, just the whisper of wind across sand, the creak of timber, and the hush of sleep drawing near. You made it, you endured, and now you rest. Sleep well. Soldier, now. We wake up in a Mongolian steppe tent. Technically a ger, but it's more like a smoky igloo made of wool and whatever the goats weren't using. Your eyelids flutter open. It's still dark outside, because the sun takes its sweet time rising over this frost-bitten landscape. The air inside the yurt is thick with the scent of scorched mutton fat and wet felt, like someone tried to cook a sweater and lost control halfway. You're breathing in smoke from the stove, but don't worry, it's only mildly toxic. Your bedding situation is as glamorous as advertised: a mat of flattened grass, stiff wool blankets, and a hard lesson in spinal misalignment. The fire has gone out. Of course, your boots, which you left too close to the door, are frozen solid actual bricks of leather. You do that thing where you slam them against the floor to soften them up, and they respond by mocking your weakness. You're 23, but your joints think you're 75. A goat is standing 2 feet from your face, staring at you like you owe it money. You try not to inhale through your nose. This is your new normal. You are a low-ranking nobody in Genghis Khan's sprawling mobile empire. You're not rich enough to sleep near the fire. You're not skilled enough to command respect. But you're just important enough to be yelled at a lot and sent out to fight bandits or worse, fetch things in the snow. And you would never think that the worst part of this morning wouldn't be the frostbite creeping up your ankle, but the knowledge that breakfast is coming soon. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments what's your local time, and where are you listening from now? Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up. Your hair feels sticky. Is that yak grease, probably? The fire's out, and the elder in your unit is muttering something about hurry before the horses freeze again. You nod, because words are too expensive to use this early. You stretch, and your back cracks so loudly the goat leaves in fear. There's your victory for the day. Out you go, hauling from the yurt into the morning cold like a stunned raccoon. The wind hits you like a slap made of ice shards. You blink hard and feel your eyelashes trying to stick together. The sky is flat and grey. The ground is solid and unfeeling. Welcome to Genghis Khan's Mongolia, where everything wants to kill you. And your socks have already given up. Historians still argue whether life in a ger was more cozy than tragic. But you're pretty sure the answer is yes. And it smells like wet wool. You trudge toward the livestock pens, because nothing says elite imperial destiny like shoveling frozen horse dung. The camp is already alive, by which we mean people are moving around in a zombie-like state while groaning into the wind. There's a brief, sacred moment where everyone stares at each other without saying anything, unified by the shared knowledge that none of you slept well, and all of you are about to make terrible life choices involving raw meat and fermented milk. First task of the day, water. Which is ironic, because the water is in solid denial of its liquid identity right now. You and another unfortunate soul grab the yoke, yes. The actual wooden beam across the shoulders, like you're auditioning for a rice farming documentary, and hike off to the river. The buckets knock against your knees and threaten to twist your spine into a Mobius strip. The river is a half-mile away, and it's less a river than a suspiciously grey ribbon frozen in place. You spend the next 20 minutes breaking through the ice with a metal spike, so dull it might as well be made of salted cracker. By the time the water is secured, your hands are so numb they feel imaginary. Historians still argue whether this routine was meant to toughen young warriors or simply weed out the weak via hypothermia. Either way, you're not winning. Back at camp, you're handed breakfast, arag, the world's least charming smoothie, made from fermented mare's milk. It smells like disappointment and tastes like regret with a yogurt aftertaste. On good days, it's only mildly alcoholic. On bad days, it might still be fermenting in your mouth. With that comes a fist-sized ball of bortsog deep-fried dough that's either hard as jade or covered in dust. Depending on the chef's current life crisis, you chew, you regret chewing. Your superior barks something at you in Mongol. You catch the word for horses, which can only mean one thing: you're off to help saddle them. The horses are not normal. They're small, scrappy, and filled with the kind of rage only short horses can contain. They bite, kick, and refuse to be impressed by your human nonsense. They know you're not important. They can smell your poverty. As you approach, one of them farts in your direction and stares directly into your soul. You mutter a curse that's probably been uttered in 12 languages across history. The horse wins this round, as usual. Fun fringe fact: Mongol horses can survive on frozen grass and almost no water. You, however, need 3 layers of fur and still can't feel your kneecaps. You manage to saddle one horse, tie down a second, and help haul a cart into alignment. Your fingers have frost inside them now. That's not a joke. You look at your knuckles and wonder if they've fossilized. By the time the sun finally crests the horizon, more of a reluctant yawn than a proper sunrise, you've already been awake for 3 hours. And you've accomplished roughly nothing. But you're not dead, yet. After that invigorating morning of livestock, frozen river water, and mild dairy poisoning, it's time to experience another thrill camp discipline. You know what keeps a mobile empire from turning into a traveling circus?
Not that it feels especially organized. It's more angry men with whips and flags than any structured system of meritocracy. But hey, at least the flags are colorful. You're summoned with a grunt, because names are a luxury and you're currently the short one who spilled soup yesterday. The day's instructions are barked out by your unit commander, who seems to have only 2 settings: bellow and spit. Your task: spear drills, formation practice. And if the gods are feeling spicy, maybe a full horseback mock charge before lunch. You'd complain, but the last guy who muttered anything was politely escorted out of camp by 2 very large men and never mentioned again. Historians still argue whether that policy was formal exile or a quiet execution. Either way, morale is great. You and 20 other low-ranking grunts march to the open plain outside the guerriere camp, where the wind is free to slap your face from every direction. The drills begin. Forward thrust, side sweep, retreat step, again, again, again. Every now and then, someone collapses from exhaustion or faints mid-spin, and the instructor's only response is to point at them and yell wrong. This, you suspect, is how Genghis Khan bred champions through rigorous instruction and zero sympathy. Eventually, the lesson pivots to horseback spear work. This is the part where you try not to die. Your horse, once again, knows you are weak. It bucks as you mount, possibly for sport, possibly just to see if your soul will leave your body. You hang on. Barely. And then the mock charge. You and your companions line up. You lower your spear. The commander shouts something inspirational, probably. It sounds more like a death threat. You charge. It's like a stampede, but with slightly more structure and slightly less dignity. Your horse stumbles, rights itself, and charges anyway. You scream internally, outwardly. You look like a hero. A cold, terrified hero with windburn on your gums. Afterwards, you're allowed to rest, by which they mean stand in place and not fall over. A grizzled old warrior named Beck shuffles over. He's missing 3 fingers, walks with a limp, and still somehow outperforms you. He gives you a boiled sheep bone to gnaw on. This is, apparently, a reward. You pretend to appreciate it, even as your teeth rattle. One quirky historical tidbit: elite soldiers sometimes softened calluses by rubbing them with sheep tallow. You, however, just bleed quietly into your gloves and hope the day ends. You return to camp, aching in places you didn't know had nerves. Your fingers blister, your thighs burn, your ego gone. You're beginning to suspect your only real weapon is spite. Still, you're a part of the machine now. A very small, slightly bruised gear in the war engine of the largest contiguous empire in history. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You wake up the next day with the grace of a dropped sack of potatoes. Every joint complains. Your legs stage a small rebellion. And your back, it's begun writing angry letters to the rest of your body, demanding immediate relocation to a more civilized era, preferably one with mattresses. But before you can even stretch, the breakfast bell clinks. And by bell, we mean a large man banging a metal pot with the emotional range of a thunderstorm. You drag yourself upright, wondering if you're actually still alive or just haunting your own body. Now, we talk food. Mongol cuisine in the age of Genghis Khan is efficient. The good news, it's warm. The bad news, it's mostly fermented. That's right. Breakfast today is air-dried curd, known as arul. It's rock-hard dairy that was probably abandoned by milk itself. You gnaw on it like a nervous beaver, hoping it won't chip a tooth. Spoiler, it will. To wash it down, there's Arag fermented mare's milk. It fizzes, it tangs, it fights back. And it's technically nutritious, assuming you survive the aftertaste. Historians still argue whether the Mongols actually enjoyed this or just feared dehydration more. And then there's soup. Always soup. Mutton broth boiled to the point where even the bones give up and dissolve slightly. It's the kind of meal that hugs your stomach and simultaneously questions your life choices. Midway through breakfast, a brawl breaks out over a piece of dried meat. No one dies, but several egos are permanently injured. The meat, ironically, is stepped on and discarded. You consider salvaging it. You don't. One of your campmates, a wiry youth named Urk, offers you a piece of bortsog, a fried dough snack that tastes like someone whispered sugar into a biscuit. It's the closest thing to dessert you've had since joining. You nearly cry. Lunch isn't much different. More mutton, more curd. Occasionally, wild onions or dried turnips show up, but they never stay long. Fresh vegetables are a fairy tale, and fruits are for nobility or hallucinations. You chew slowly, pretending every bite is part of some ancient warrior tradition, rather than just what was left in the cart. You learn to adapt, swallow quickly, chew strategically, never take the last portion unless you're prepared to fight for it, and always sniff before sipping anything white. Could be milk, could be foot wash. Nobody checks. Dinner is communal, and by now your group has sorted out its hierarchy. You, unfortunately, are still at the bottom, which means bones, not meat. On the plus side, you've learned how to suck marrow like a true survivor. That's a skill they don't teach in school. One strange thing you notice, the senior warriors hum while eating. It's not a tune. It's more like a low vibration. Urk says it's to scare off bad spirits. You suspect it's to drown out the flavor. The evening ends with a shared jug of very questionable airag, passed around like a sacred relic. You take a swig. It tastes like commitment. Regret follows. As you lie down to sleep, stomach half full and spirit 3/4 broken, you reflect on your progress. You didn't vomit in front of anyone today. Victory. You wake up stiff, dusty, and just the right amount of confused to forget that you fell asleep next to a horse's rear end. Again. At some point during the night, the fire went out and the steppe wind snuck in along with several beetles, one of which now claims your left boot as a summer home. Now, we turn to the glamorous world of hygiene in Genghis Khan's empire. Spoiler, it doesn't exist, at least not in the sense that your 21st century body would recognize or accept without protest. You start your morning wash with a handful of dust. That's not an insult, it's a literal method. Mongols believed that bathing in water, especially warm water, weakened the body and opened it to illness. Which is ironic, because historians still argue whether this belief saved them from waterborne diseases or just gave them really confident fleas. To clean your face, you might rub it with a woolen cloth or snow, if it's winter. Congratulations-free exfoliation. If it's summer, you'll be lucky to find anything cleaner than the sweat dripping off your neighbor's horse. You try anyway, and end up just shifting the dirt around your face until you look slightly more blended with the landscape. Toilets delightfully non-existent. You relieve yourself behind a rock, facing Mecca, or at least some random patch of sky, and pray the wind doesn't turn. Mongol camps had no designated latrines, which makes you very aware of where you step, especially at night. Public sanitation was, let's say, interpretive. Teeth, you rub them with a twig or a horsehair brush. Or not at all, after all. Most Mongols believed chewing bones or drinking strong airag kept their teeth strong, which is scientifically bold and dentally tragic. Body odor, a badge of honor. Or, at least, nobody comments on it. You smell like everyone else: damp wool, fermented milk, campfire smoke, and tactical neglect. It's a scent that screams, "I'm surviving aggressively." You do hear rumors of ritual smoke cleansing, Warriors sometimes stand near a fire made of juniper or sheep dung to smoke off evil spirits and unwanted odors. You try this once. The spirits remain. So does the smell. Now you just smell like evil spirits on fire. Your hair, now a thicket of dust-dreaded ambition, gets no sympathy. There are no combs. You detangle with fingers and the occasional threat. Some warriors braid their hair with bits of leather or copper. You, lacking both resources and style, simply tie it back with a strip of linen that might have once been part of a saddle. Clothing gets no love either. You haven't changed in 5 days, not out of laziness, but because you own one tunic and a set of felt trousers. Laundry requires water, soap, and dignity, all of which are strictly theoretical concepts in this world. When it rains, you rejoice. Not because it brings life to the plains, but because it's your only real chance at a rinse. You strip half naked and stand there like a confused forest goblin, letting muddy droplets cascade down your goosebumped skin. It is glorious and terrible. And then you slip and fall face first into a pile of horse dung. Dignity restored to zero. Personal hygiene in Mongol society, it turns out, isn't about being clean, it's about not dying of exposure, frostbite or ridicule. And somehow, despite your grime-layered shell, you begin to feel strangely at home in it. As the sun climbs, so does the weight of your daily duties. Only your duties don't involve spreadsheets or deadlines. No. Your tasks involve saddles, livestock, and the terrifying knowledge that today's biggest challenge might be a goat, or your commander's temper, or a surprise skirmish because someone overcooked the mutton again. You start with the horses. Mongol horses are famously hardy, small, muscular, and powered almost exclusively by rage and grass. These creatures have no interest in being your friend. You approach your assigned mount with what can only be described as nervous optimism. You whisper reassurances. It spits in your direction. Good morning. Tending to the horses means brushing, feeding, checking hooves, and occasionally massaging their backs with your forehead when they suddenly decide to buck. Mongol culture practically worships the horse your life. Travel, and even warfare depend on it. You don't just ride a horse. You become its deeply unqualified co-pilot. Once the animals are managed, it's time for weapons training. Your bow is short, compact, and designed for use on horseback. Pulling it to full draw is like trying to unbend time. Your instructor yells, you squint, you fire. The arrow lands 3 meters away, buried halfway into a pile of manure. You nod like this was intentional. Then comes wrestling practice. Mongol wrestling, or bok, is less about finesse and more about aggressively hugging someone until gravity helps you win. You are thrown within 6 seconds. The air exits your lungs and possibly your will to live. The victor pats you on the shoulder and offers you fermented milk as a consolation prize. You accept. You regret. Lunch is boiled meat. Again, goat. Probably. Or sheep. Could be yesterday's horse. If things went sideways, it's served with hard, dry bread that doubles as a projectile weapon in emergencies. You chew thoughtfully. You consider whether food in modern prisons might actually be more diverse. The rest of your afternoon is a cocktail of chores and drills. You're ordered to inspect armor lamella plates strung together with rawhide. Your job patch cracks, tighten cords, and try not to cut yourself. You fail once. You bleed a little. A nearby warrior looks up, shrugs and says, "Blood feeds courage." You wonder if bandages also feed tetanus. You're then given the honor of cleaning weapons. Daggers, swords, arrowheads each coated in layers of dried mud, sweat, and history. You scrub with sand and water from a half-frozen stream. It feels like polishing regrets.
Still, the real work isn't the labor, it's the discipline. Mongol military life runs on strict hierarchy and even stricter silence. Orders are obeyed, not discussed. Mistakes are corrected with barked commands or silent judgment. Your superior, who has 3 teeth and 0 patience, watches your every move like a hawk with commitment issues. Historians still argue whether the brutal training regime was rooted in necessity or cruelty. You, personally, suspect it's a bit of both. After all, only a society constantly at war would look at back-breaking drills and say, "This builds character." By nightfall, you can no longer feel your arms or your ego. But you did survive. You didn't fall off your horse again. You didn't get stabbed accidentally during spear practice. And you only mildly insulted the cook by asking what animal the stew used to be. You crawl back to your tent, skin sticky with sweat and dust, ribs sore from wrestling and life choices. You stare at the roof and wonder, is this what strength feels like? Or is it just what happens when pain becomes routine? The night offers no rest. Mongol sleep is not about comfort, it's about survival. You lie on a felt mat inside your ger, surrounded by 20 other snoring comrades and the thick, moist aroma of leather, sweat, and what might be boiled intestines from last Tuesday. The silence is broken only by occasional snorts, creaking armor, and your own internal monologue begging for unconsciousness. At some unknown hour, possibly 2 minutes after you finally doze off, you are awakened by a trumpet blast. You spring up, smack your head on the low support pole, and stagger outside. It's a drill, or an ambush, or a practical joke by a sadistic officer who finds sleep morally suspicious. Today's mission patrol duty along the frontier. Now, we haven't discussed the frontier yet. Have we? It's where civilization meets chaos. A windswept no man's land, dotted with lonely watch posts, rocky outcrops, and the occasional band of extremely unfriendly strangers. You mount up, bow strapped to your back, and ride out into what feels like the last chapter of a survival guide you never finished reading. The wind slices through your clothes, which, spoiler alert, are not windproof. Your boots are felt. Your trousers are fur-lined, but in the sense that a moth-eaten carpet is insulated. Every gust finds a gap and takes liberties with your body temperature. Still, the horizon is vast and quiet. You ride for hours, scanning the hills for signs of movement. It's mostly sheep, but at one point there's a dust plume. You freeze. Everyone does. Bows are drawn, hearts pound, but it's just a camel caravan. Traders or spies. Or traders who might also be spies. Historians still argue whether the Mongols tolerated merchants out of economic pragmatism or because they made for useful informants. You continue on, stopping briefly to set up a lookout post. This means stacking stones, marking distances, and shouting at each other through the wind about who forgot to bring the signaling cloths again. You warm your hands with a dung-fueled fire. It smells like optimism dipped in regret. After a while, your group stumbles upon something more serious, an abandoned enemy camp. It's not large, but its recent, still warm ashes, hoofprints, and discarded scraps. You examine it like a detective with frostbite. This is why you're here. Not to fight, necessarily, but to know who might want to. Patrolling the frontier is less about glory and more about nerves. Every shape might be a rider. Every tree line might hide a scout. The paranoia is exhausting. The boredom worse. You whisper jokes under your breath just to prove you're still mentally intact. One guy makes finger puppets from goat leather. Another hums a battle song as a lullaby. Eventually, you stop for a meal, which, of course, means hard cheese and fermented mare's milk. Chewing the cheese is like gnawing on a brick of salty regret. The milk tastes like what happens when yogurt gives up on life. But you drink it anyway. Hunger is humbling. By sundown, you make it back to camp, No ambushes, no casualties. Just windburn and an entirely new appreciation for modern outerwear. You dismount, legs jelly-like from hours in the saddle, and wonder how anyone managed to conquer half the world on a diet of curds and adrenaline. Still, you didn't run, you didn't freeze, you didn't embarrass yourself more than usual. And in Mongol terms, that's a win. You sleep tonight with one eye open, not because you're afraid, but because it's genuinely hard to relax when your pillow is also your saddlebag.
The weather in the Mongol steppe is not just a feature of the landscape, it's a personality. A deeply unstable, wildly unpredictable, emotionally manipulative personality. One moment, it's gentle sunshine and the scent of thawed grass. The next, a snow squall so sudden it feels like a prank from a weather god with a grudge. You wake in the middle of the night to frost forming inside the gi. Yes, inside, your breath hangs in the air like a ghost of warmth that decided not to stick around. You wrap yourself tighter in your robe, but the cold is not impressed. It slinks in through seams, down your collar, and into your soul. And it's only spring. In summer, the steppe does a complete reversal. You bake. Your clothes, designed to retain heat, now trap it like a cruel joke. The felt layers cling to your body, soaking in sweat until you feel like a walking wool sponge. There's no shade, just the wide, mocking expanse of endless blue sky. You'd think someone would have invented a straw hat or a sun visor. But no, you squint into the distance, hoping your retinas don't fry before lunch. Rain doesn't fall politely. It arrives in sheets. Your boots fill with water in minutes. Mud clings to everything. The roads, if you can call them that, turn into pudding. Your horse is less thrilled about this than you are, which is saying something. And yet, Mongol warriors continue through all of it. Why? Because if they don't, someone from another tribe might show up and relieve them of their sheep, their pride, or their internal organs. Rain or shine, snow or sandstorm, the show must go on. There is no climate control. There is no break room. There is only the weather and your body, which is somehow both too cold and too sweaty. You try bathing. Once, a nearby river looks promising. You strip, dive in, and immediately regret every life decision that brought you to this point. It's less refreshing and more heart-stopping. The cold is a full-body slap that leaves your teeth protesting the very concept of cleanliness. You emerge a cleaner but emotionally scarred person. Bathing, as it turns out, is optional for most of the year. Soap is a concept from the future. Instead, you rub yourself with horse fat or a coarse cloth. This is less spa treatment and more greasy exfoliation under duress. Historians still argue whether Mongol hygiene was truly poor by medieval standards, or simply misunderstood through foreign eyes. Some sources suggest their practices were shockingly practical, cleaning wounds with alcohol, shaving heads to reduce lice. Others describe them as the aromatic nightmares of the Silk Road. You'd like to believe you're clean, but your nose, your comrades, and the flies all disagree. Even your clothing turns against you. The heavy deal, your long overcoat, sags under humidity. In winter, it freezes into something resembling a woolen coffin. Your boots stiffen into foot-shaped cages. You envy the horses, at least they get to roll in the dirt without judgment. There's no hiding from the weather, no inside to escape to unless you count a packed gi full of armored humans and one very judgmental goat. Still, the Mongols didn't conquer the known world by waiting for good weather. You hunch your shoulders, pull your hood low, and ride into whatever Mother Nature feels like throwing at you next, because surviving means adapting. Complaining helps too, but mostly adapting. You wake before dawn again, not because of any alarm clock, but because something warm and wet is on your cheek. It's a goat, inside the gur,
and it's licking your face like it owns the place. You've lost the concept of personal space. Haven't you outside? The sky is a moody purple. The wind has shifted. Your joints know before you do that, it's going to be a bad day. You creak out of your bedroll like an elderly marionette and step into your boots, still damp, still suspiciously crusty. Breakfast is a challenge. Not because it's complex, just the opposite. You gnaw on dried meat so tough it could double as building material. Then slurp down a bowl of fermented mare's milk. The taste is acquired by someone else. You haven't acquired it yet. But you drink anyway, because you need the calories. Life on the steppe is less about flavor and more about fuel. You'll need it. Today, you patrol the outer ring of camp. That means hours of slow riding, eyes peeled for signs of bandits, spies, or bored warriors with a grudge. No podcast, no shade, just you, your horse, and the occasional vulture circling overhead like a sentient to-do list. You pass an older guard, his face leathered by wind and wisdom. He nods. You nod back. No one speaks. Talking wastes breath, and besides, there's little to say that hasn't already been muttered under someone's hooded breath at 3 a.m. Later, you're assigned to cleaning latrine pits. Glamorous. The stench is almost a physical object. But you do it. Because if you don't, someone else might do it worse. Or throw you into it. Mongol justice is efficient, not delicate. Still, historians still argue whether this gritty, endlessly practical lifestyle was brutal or brilliant. The Empire's military success suggests one answer. Your aching back suggests another. Evenings are better. There's music sometimes, drums, two-stringed fiddles, throat singing that vibrates your bones. You sit by the fire, wrap your deal tighter, and let the warmth seep into your skin. Someone passes a flask. You don't ask what's in it, you just drink. And for a few minutes, you forget the lice, the saddle sores, and the goat who's claimed your pillow. But then the drums stop. A horn sounds in the distance. Orders are barked. The night isn't over. It never really is. Because here, in Genghis Khan's empire, rest is a luxury, survival is a skill, and comfort is a rumor spread by soft people from faraway lands. Still, as you pull on your boots again and mount up beneath a star-strewn sky, you can't help but feel it a strange sense of pride. You're dirty, sleep-deprived, slightly traumatized, but you're still here. You've made it another day.